Hi, welcome to 20 Ideas Using 20 Fat Quarters with GourmetQuilter. I'm Susan Clare, GourmetQuilter, and we're just having a whole series of ideas. We started out with 20 fat quarters. On the website on gourmetquilter.com there's more information, there's a pattern if you're interested in it. There's a downloadable pattern that comes out every day for 20 days, and there's a video for each idea each day as well. So in part one of the pattern came a cutting chart for how we're cutting the fat quarters. So we had 20 fat quarters to start with, and we've cut them all the same. We had labels so that we could label everything ready for each project as we get to it. So I've still got some of them here. We're now up to project number, or idea number 13, so we're doing really well. But we've still got some to go. But we're also doing, some of them are starting out with some of the newer bits, and some of them are using some of the leftover bits from the previous or so project. So this is another one using some of the leftover pieces that sometimes when we make things we have little areas that we cut away, corners, and that make little triangles and squares. So when we made the boats we had a whole lot of things left over. We did a quilt with little sailboats, and on the end of the boats with all these triangles that we cut away that we didn't need in that quilt. So rather than waste them, I thought we could make some little projects using some of them. So this time we're going to be making just a little needle book with a little loop fastening, and so we just needed to have some batting, some fabric, we need some wool felt, we need some of the triangles for a little block. So these are the triangles that were left over, as I said, from the boat. We just need to trim them so that they work size-wise for us. So it's as simple as lining up a diagonal line with our diagonal seam and trimming them to the size that we're looking for. I'm using the markings on the ruler so that I can come in and sit. So when I've done the first two sides I can turn it around and line up the cut edges and trim off the other edges. So it's as simple as that. They're very useful, and it's great to find some little things that we can make using them. So this time I'm suggesting a little block in the middle of a pinwheel. It doesn't have to be a pinwheel, but it works with these little triangles. So I've actually gone ahead and made a little block here ready to put in. So I've got all my pieces cut, so we need to put a little side each side of the block, and we need to put a little top and bottom just to bring it up to the size for the front of the little needle case. So I can go ahead and get these put on. We're going to put the sides on first, and then we're going to put the top and bottom on, and then I'll show you how we're going to put that all together. Just press these, and then we can add the longer top and bottom strips. So I might go ahead and do that. It's just straightforward sewing, and I'll come back and show you the next bit. So I've gone ahead and I put the sides either side of the little block, and I put a top and bottom on, and then I've stitched it to the square for the back as well. So that's all very straightforward. And now I've got a piece of batting here. Now it is a lightly fusible batting. It does not need to be. It's just something not too bulky is a good idea, but because it is just lightly fusible I might as well iron it to it. It's just a lightweight cotton poly blend, and it just is a very light fusing on it, so it doesn't make it stiff or anything like that. So then we've got a lining that we're going to put in there, but we need to include the little elastic button loop if we're going to put one on. So it's really nice to get little bits of coloured elastic, and sometimes they can be a little bit hard to come by. However, very often you can get little hair elastics that come in all sorts of colours that are kind of fun and perfect for our purpose. So you'd actually would get two out of one of these just lightweight hair elastics. We only need one, so that's okay. So we want to attach that onto here. We can put it onto this one with a little bit of batting as well. So you just want the centre of the back, because it's going to come out there, and so we just want to attach it to that first. So we just want to probably bear in mind that we're coming in 1/4 of an inch with our seam allowance, and we just want to leave sort of 1/2 an inch of loop exposed. So where our centre marker is, we want to stitch that across. So we just want to stitch it in place now before we try and join everything up so that it's already where we want it. So within the seam allowance, so a bit less than 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and just go over it and then maybe just back over it just to hold it in place. And then we can actually trim away the extra. We don't need all that at this stage. And now we can sew all this together. So I'm going to sew them right sides together all the way around, but I'm going to leave a gap for turning. So it doesn't really matter where you leave it because we'll be top stitching that gap closed. So maybe just somewhere along one of the edges, probably about 2 to 3 inches to allow it to turn through nicely. And when you come around here, make sure that you've stitched over the elastic. So I can go ahead and do this stitching, I think, and then I'll show you the turning out and getting it ready for the next bit. So I'm just coming up the last little bit here. I'm just going to leave my gap somewhere about there. And then I just want to clip these corners so that they're not too bulky at the corners for when we turn it out the right way. And now we can turn it out the right way. It seems a little harsh to be scrunching everything so much, but it's the way to do it. So you may need some sort of little turning tool. I have a trusty pencil that I tend to use because it's nearly always with me. And it works quite well just to pop those little corners out, and they should come out fairly well because we've clipped those little bulky bits off the actual corner. And then we can give it a bit of a press. And when we're pressing it, we want to press in the little gap opening so that it will get caught in when we go around and top stitch it. So we'll do that in a second. Just need these corners out. Another great little idea as a little gift, somewhere to keep your needles and pins. All sorts of things you can do with these little leftover triangles that we end up with. So I'm going to leave the seam with the gap till last, but I'm going to press these other seams to make sure everything's sitting out nicely, and our loop is sitting out really nicely there as well. And then, so where the gap is, we just want to press that in so that it looks like it's stitched, because it will be stitched with the top stitching. So we want it all to just line up as nicely as possible. So just turning it in the amount it would be in had we have stitched it with our 1/4 inch seam. So that's looking pretty good, I think. And the same on the lining, it's also looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to stitch all the way around, just close to that edge. Probably even slightly less than 1/8 of an inch, but somewhere in that order, so that it closes over our gap at the same time. So I'm just going to go all the way around. And then if you want to do some other stitching, once you've done all the way around the edge, when I did this one here, I just did a little sort of a square inside there, and then I've gone around the outside of the block there, through all the layers. So you can do all that before we go ahead and put the pages inside. So I might go ahead and do some of this and then show you a bit later. So I'm just going around the edge of the little block in the front there, Just outlines it nicely and holds everything together well. So I'm probably just a good 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. So that's all looking pretty good. We do need to do a line down the back, but we'll do that as we put in the page inside. So I've got some, because I've got a nice red elastic on there, I've got some nice red wool felt. So this is felted wool, so it is actually a woven product here that I'm using. You could use actual wool felt. Wool is quite nice. I guess it doesn't even have to be wool. Wool is always nice to keep things in though. So I just thought I'd show you, I'm cutting it. If you've got a woven fabric, I suggest that if you've got some pinking shears, that you do that, or you can get rotary cutters with little pinking type blades in them. So I've got one here. So I'm just going to have a little bit of fun doing it. So I did that on this one. This has got the little pinked edge. It's a little wavy edge, not specifically pinking. We tend to think is an absolute zigzag. This is a little wavy one. So it's like a little wave cutter. So I'm just going to trim that off. So you use it just the same. You just have to be a little bit careful because it's not the flat blade, but it works pretty much the same otherwise and just cuts through. So that's kind of nice to do that. And then I'm going to position that onto this. So you want the wool to be a little bit smaller than your actual cover, because when it folds over too, it just kind of wants to fill up the space a little bit. So just bear that in mind when you're trimming it in to fit. And so that's all sitting there nicely. So I'm going to turn it over and I'm just going to stitch that line down there, and we're pretty much done except for the button then. So I'm just stitching all the way through, right along in the ditch of the join line in that seam there. And we have the Needlecase. So how fun is that? That was pretty good. There's a couple of threads there. We'll just trim those off. We like it to look nice and tidy. So there's a really nice little needle case. It just needs a button. I've got a button sitting here somewhere ready to go on, but you don't need to watch me sewing a button on, but that'll just loop over. So I've actually just used a little button with a shank. You don't have to, but often we have buttons with shanks and we don't know what to do with them. This would be a chance when you could actually use one. But I hope you've enjoyed that little project. That was project number 13 that we're doing with the fat quarters, using some of our cutaway triangles from our fat quarter projects, a little needle case, and thank you. And I will see you again with project number 14.